This video will deal with power and politics in organizations. Power and politics play a key role in organizations, and we'll see this over the coming slides. It is an important topic to bear in mind when we consider organizations and their structure and their performance. There needs to be some source of power which directs and controls organizational activities to achieve goals. So there has to be some sort of power. It must come from somewhere. Someone must say what needs to be done and how it's to be done. If that person doesn't exist, the chances are it won't be done. So there are power relationships within organizations, and that's the subject matter of this video. Without power, employees will not cooperate. They will lack a vision. They'll lack enthusiasm. They may be confused about their roles and responsibilities. So power is seen by many theorists as a desirable force within organizations. When we say without power, employees will not cooperate, some people may challenge that and say, well, they will cooperate, but perhaps there will be more dissent, more disputes, more meetings. It may be a waste of resources, a waste of time. There may be confusion about what to do. So having somebody with authority and with power enables the job to get done perhaps quicker. That doesn't mean the power has to be abused. It doesn't mean that there's coercion. It means the power of persuasion, leading by example. Someone that the workers can look to, the staff can look to and think that person is competent and we should do it that way as well. So let's look at power. According to George and Jones, it's the ability of one person or group to cause another person or group to do something that they otherwise might not have done. So it's when there's causation, when one person or one group of people gets another group of people or another person to do something that perhaps that person would not have done naturally. That's power. They have got the person to behave in that way because they have power. They have power over the person. Politics is another concept used within organizations to achieve common or personal goals and interests. So we think of politics on a national arena. We think of the government. We think of elections and politics in that way. But we can have politics and dealings in power within organizations as well. Management or people from a higher position use their power to influence work politics to control decision making. So when some people within an organization have power, they may be able to use that power to get other staff to work in particular ways, or reorganize the business in a certain way, or to develop a new product, or relocate, or whatever it is they've got that they want. By virtue of their position, they have power. They're able to manipulate the organization to perform in a way that they want, and to do this by using the power, wielding the power, and getting staff on their side sometimes to agree with them. But they're doing so because the situation has been manipulated, has been set up in that way. Workplace politics is a common activity pursued by employees from a position of power. For example, the use of political behaviour to gain promotion. Sometimes staff want to be promoted, so they may make life easy for their manager. They may reward the manager reward him on his birthday or her birthday. They may reward them for work well done and thank them for work well done and praise them in public. But all of that is going towards building up goodwill, which they will then try to capitalize on in terms of promotion. So they're only doing it to try and get promotion. According to George and Jones again, well, activities in which managers engage to increase their power and pursue goals that favour their individual and group interests. That's what we mean by politics here. It's managers engaging and using their power to pursue goals that favour their interests. And a lot of it can be quite subtle. As I just said earlier, it may be praising a manager in public and thereby gaining a friendship with that manager, who will then in the future support some other activity that the one praising the manager wants to see happen. So it's very subtle. It doesn't have to be that explicit. Now let's look at some perspectives on power and politics. Management using power and politics for own interests can cause harm to the interests of other people, employees, and to the organisation and its resources. And that's one of the big problems, that when managers or personnel within the business start to use power and use their influence in this political sense to gain some advantage, they're gaining the advantage for themselves, not necessarily for the organisation. So they may want promotion or they may want something, but that, whatever it is, may not be in the interest of the organisation. So that's one of the big problems with this type of behaviour within companies. It can improve organisation decision making, healthy competition, bring new ideas and solutions through individual political power. So there is another side to it. Sometimes when employees are trying to be political, trying to curry favour amongst senior staff, in so doing they may make decision making easier, they may facilitate the decision making process, they may bring in new ideas. If several of them are competing for the same position, there's competition amongst them. So there is another side which could be quite positive. So we have two perspectives there. One, it's not good because they're acting in their own interest, and two, they could be bringing in new ideas and they could be competing and showing enthusiasm, and that's a positive thing for the organisation. Politics can only be successful if management employees possess the power to influence decisions. Well, that's the crux of the matter. Politics depends on influencing decision makers. So politicians during an election, during a general election, for example, will try to influence the voters. But if the voters can't be influenced, then the whole activity was for nothing. The whole activity was in vain. So politics can only be successful if the management or the employees possess power to influence decisions. So they have to be able to influence decisions. Otherwise, it's not being successful. Level of power can be seen from organisation structure and often flows downwards. It flows downwards from the top right down through the organization. So we'd expect the person at the top of the organization to be the most powerful. Then the next one, slightly less power, and slightly less power again, going all the way down through the various management structure of a business, all the way down to the shop floor. So the level of power can be seen as almost cascading downwards, with the shop floor the least powerful, the senior boardroom all powerful, just about. How management increase their role and power? Well, George and Jones again suggest key tactics individuals can adopt to increase their status and power within organizations. So this increased power then enables them to engage in political behavior and effectively influence decision making. So they suggest that key tactics individuals can adopt. So they recognize that there are various tactics, not one, that management can use to influence decision making. These could be all sorts, and we'll talk about them later, but it could be influencing the agenda for meetings. It could be in making cases on trying to get decisions based on technical know-how and how important their department is. It could be based on need or their argument that they are under-resourced or they need to innovate or they need to update. There are many arguments that management can make which are not necessarily pressing arguments. They may be true, but they're not urgent, but they may be presented as urgent. Of course, once a manager has won various points, then it may be easier in the future to win more points because he or she will know how to go about winning favour with his or her colleagues and getting support and perhaps even trading. I'll support you on this if you support me on that. So that may also be an issue. So we have political tactics, and this is recognizing who has power. The first thing and the most important thing is to recognize who has power. There is no point in trying to influence people without power because they can't deliver. So it's important to recognize who has power and who has power in different situations. It may vary. It may be that the chief executive of the business has power in all areas, but sometimes that power may be delegated to particular managers or to particular departments. So it's important that the rest of the managers know who has the power to do something. And that's the person who is targeted politically. Tapping the sources of functional and divisional power. So it's important to recognize in a functional way, let's say within the production department, who has power, what's needed, and how can that department help other departments as well in the future, perhaps in future negotiations. And deals of this nature can be struck. As I said earlier, if you help me, I'll help you. And if I help you with this, then you owe me. And later on, you help me with something else. And there's a type of trading in that manner which may take place. And it could be on a functional level, as I said, or it might be on a divisional basis. Depends on the size of the organization. If it's a very large company, it may have different divisions, and each division may be arguing their case. Controlling the agenda, I mentioned earlier also. Sometimes managers very subtly influence the agenda. It may be the wording on the agenda. It may be the sequence on the agenda, where the items appear on the agenda. Sometimes managers might want to have their request, their decision, as the last item on the agenda, because by which time the rest of the meeting are tired and they've been through a long meeting and they don't want to continue debating and carrying on the meeting, so it might be easier to get what the manager wants by having it as a last item. Can happen. But the chairperson of the meeting may be aware of these tactics and may take measures to ensure it doesn't happen. Or if the meeting is very long, perhaps to break the meeting into two parts, which would obviate the advantage that was seen by the person who placed the item on the agenda. But controlling the agenda might be a way of trying to influence decisions. Bringing in outside experts. Sometimes when people want something, they may call for expert opinion. They may rely on research findings, or they may rely on expert opinion from colleges or universities or from consultants in support of what they want. And they will present this evidence to his or her colleagues at the meeting, and it would seem that the case then has been approved almost. It has got widespread support on the outside. And if the meeting don't agree, they're somehow flying in the face of what everybody on the outside thinks about a certain situation. So bringing in outside experts is a way around, or a way of trying to get a decision put through. Building coalitions and alliances. Well, I've been hinting at this one right throughout. This is probably one of the more popular ways of getting political power, and that is to do side deals with other departments, to befriend other departments and support them, and then look for support in return. And in this way they become alliances. It could be that the production department becomes friendly with distribution, but they may also become friendly with the stores, and maybe with even the accounts department. But in return, even though they are now acting as a block at meetings and they're voting together as meetings, there's always the possibility that one will disagree in the future. So it's important, as in all cases of building coalitions, to keep everybody on board, to keep everyone happy. So everyone should get something out of the coalition. And of course, there's no legal basis for any of this. They don't write it down, they don't produce it on paper. It's just an understanding, a friendship amongst them. Tapping the sources of functional and divisional power. Well, managers can increase their power by making themselves irreplaceable. For example, developing specialist skills or knowledge which benefit the organisation. And the organisation should be aware that this possibility exists. When managers become very powerful because they have particular expertise, a particular knowledge, and if they're not prepared to share the knowledge, and if they're not prepared to train up other staff, they're starting to make themselves irreplaceable. If the organisation lose them, they will lose something very important. So for that reason, it's important that the organisation understands the different tasks and ensure that there is some sort of succession planning. Should a person leave, someone else can take over, and they have been trained to take over. Managers can also develop key relationships with customers, clients, suppliers, which help limit uncertainty. And sometimes managers can be seen as very important because they have got such good relationships with customers or with suppliers or with clients. So the managers are seen as very important within the organization, and that of course gives the managers power. It gives them power to argue for better salaries or better working conditions or whatever it is they want, because they have got this relationship on the outside. Managers can make themselves more central to the organization by taking on more responsibility, securing their position. Managers tend to initially start with perhaps the management of a department, but later on they try to take on extra roles which cut across the departments. This could be anything from health and safety or training or being involved in some other functions which cuts across various departments. And by virtue of this, they're seen as not just departmental managers, but organizational people. They are people important within the organization because they are delivering across departments, delivering a service or an activity or providing something across the organization. And that, of course, bolsters their position. That, of course, makes them more secure, but gives them more power. Now, recognizing who has power. Well, developing relationships with individuals in a higher position of power. So the whole idea is to try and spot who has power and then who has most power, and trying to develop a relationship with them, trying to engage them in conversation, trying to find out more about them, trying to please them, find out what they want, the way they think, and performing to the way they think will enhance the reputation of that person, and the person may benefit ultimately by having more responsibility and more power. So that's an element of how to gain the power. A person can work their way up the promotion ladder by developing positive relationships with the right managers. So just trying to figure out which managers are important, who are the important ones, and then trying to work the way up the management ladder and trying to please the ones with power so they will help them to climb up the ladder. Identifying how to access the right power source can help individuals in placing themselves in social groups who has the most power to influence decisions. And sometimes a lot of this activity may take place off the job, away from the organization. It may be joining the same clubs or having the same recreational interests that forges a bond. It may be that the senior manager who has a lot of power is interested in playing golf or fishing or going for country walks or whatever it is, and the manager who wants to get power and promote him or herself may adopt the same sort of recreational interest, so as to try and make contact and have commonality with that person. Recognizing who has power. Well, the following are tactics to identify level of management power. The sources of power: management power from legitimate authority. So trying to find what's the source of the power. Why has the person got power? Where does that person derive the power? Where does it come from? So it's looking at management and looking at the power of the various strata of management to try and identify who has power and the sources of that power. The sources of the power could be, as I said earlier, expertise, friendship with clients and customers and suppliers, It could be based on long history of involvement with the business. It could be on activities within the business which are not based on necessarily on a particular functional area, but cut across the whole organization. So there are many areas that can generate the sources of power. The consequences of power. Which managers benefit and which managers benefit from the decisions, i.e. managers who benefit from resources. So what are the consequences of power? Well, the consequence of power could be huge within organizations. It could have the ability to hire and fire, make someone redundant, or replace someone, or demote someone, or promote someone. So the consequences of power are quite dramatic within organizations. So it's trying to find the source of the power, who has the power and the source, and then looking at the consequences of the power. What does the power enable that person to do? What legitimately can that person do? What are the symbols of power? The job title, prestige, status, education. The symbols of power can be manifest in different ways within different organizations. It could be the manager has got an office to him or herself, or the manager has got a secretarial support, or the manager has got flexi time and can arrive in late or leave early, or whatever it is. So there are symbols of power that need to be looked at as well. Personal reputation. Some people with power are held in very high esteem within the organization, which means that they have got status within the organization. And that's seen as important. It symbolizes, it tells the rest of the employees and the staff that this person is powerful. Representational indication. Roles and responsibilities indicate power. For example, a manager may be part of a particular committee, perhaps a very important committee that makes very important decisions about the direction in which the business is moving. Perhaps the committee that develops corporate strategy, the long-term strategy of the business. So it indicates the power that the person has. I said earlier, controlling the agenda is a way of gaining power. Well, being part of a committee or controlling decision making within an agenda, that enables a person to not just acquire power, but to further his or her own interests by acquiring even more power. So the person is probably ever vigilant in looking at ways to try and gain even more influence. And one way to do it is to control the agenda. What exactly is being decided? What's being done? What's what are the plans of the organization? How can the plans be changed to influence decisions that will benefit that particular manager? So it's looking at that type of behavior. Managers like to be members or part of a committee where they have some level of control and can make a degree of change and decisions. So managers, if they sit on certain committees, they can influence the way the organization is moving. They can vote against something or vote for something. And even sometimes, if they don't feel strongly about whatever the decision is, they may still vote because they're trying to please someone else on the committee. They're trying to build up a little power base for themselves on the committee, so that in future, if they need support on that committee, they would hope that the favour would be returned. Powerful managers can alter decisions which are not in their favour. Well, if managers have gained a lot of power, then they can filter out decisions that are not in their favour. They can either not implement them or only half-heartedly implement those decisions. Or they can even work on ways to show that decisions were bad right from the start. In other words, the decisions and the implementation of whatever change came about as a consequence of the decision, that was doomed to failure. In fact, it failed because the manager did not properly implement it, or the manager wanted it to fail. So they can alter decisions. They can bring forward the decisions they like, and they can kill off the decisions they don't like. Sometimes it may take time to do it, but they will work their way towards trying to achieve that. Bringing in an outside expert. Well, managers can employ outside experts help to provide an objective view if they feel their position is at stake. Outside experts tend to be believed because they have no vested interest in the business. So they tend to be seen as objective. And if they're objective, they're listened to. So managers can bring in outside experts, people from, as I said, colleges, universities, consultants, whoever it is. They can bring those people in and they will present the case, which is really presenting the manager's case, the one who wants more power and who wants to influence the particular decision. For example, disagreements can occur over job cuts, organisational change or restructuring. These type of disagreements, there may be an appeal to outside agencies, the HRM section, or a consultant in HRM from the outside, or some sort of expert from the outside. Some managers may feel threatened by more powerful managers and can feel they are losing their position. Not all managers are equal within organisations. Some may be more important than others to the organisation. So there may be some small departments that are really luxury departments in terms of the overall activities of the business. These are ones that perhaps supply information or supply ideas or do some particular activity which is not adding to the product that's been made. Now the managers for those departments may feel particularly threatened, and they are more likely to be the managers who will want to build alliances and build friendships. Building coalitions and alliances. Well, managers can form a coalition with other managers to increase their positions of power. To do this to influence decision making. And this happens all the way through, and I've mentioned it right the way through this set of slides. But managers try to make friendships and try to form coalitions with other managers in the hope that if they support the other managers will support them when they are threatened. So they're trying to form coalitions, agreements between themselves. And when they go to meetings, they go as a block. They go together, but they speak with one voice. They support each other. Managers can form functional alliances with other departments. Each department is then dependent on each other. So sometimes the departments can form agreements amongst themselves, and they're almost merging, but the managers are trying to just simply get support and to enable them to get more power through the collaboration and cooperation of the various departments. Each department supports their own interests while depending on each other. So they seem to maintain their autonomy. The individual departments may still exist, and the managers still exist. It's just that they know they're in a weakened position, perhaps vis-a-vis the more important departments, production or accounts or marketing or some of the frontline departments. So they form these very informal agreements with other managers in similar positions, and to try to support themselves in this way, trying to ensure their survival. So that's the source that we've used more or less in the preparation of these notes. It is an important topic because it happens, and it happens in most businesses. It's the case that management is not necessarily working for the good of the organization. It's more that the management are working for the good of themselves. And in this case, they are bringing up rules and regulations and changes which bolster their own position. But to do that, they have to have power. And they have power because they are either seen as having power, or they have alliances within the organization which support them. They can't push too far, because if they did, they may damage the health of the business, the financial health of the business. So they have to moderate what they want, but at the same time they're in a better position by virtue of having the power than if they didn't have it. So that's what comes out of this, and it's, as I said, an interesting topic. It applies to many businesses. It paints a very selfish picture of the management, who are just who just want power and want influence and want to promote themselves. But that's the view that comes across when we consider this type of material. Anyway, let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.